Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to part 2 of the 2003 Honda CR-85 RB restoration. If you guys missed the previous video, you should definitely go check it out. In the first video, we got the bike completely torn down, got the frame cleaned up, and dropped off for powder coating. It turned out really nice. It looks really good. I'm really happy with this finished product. My frame did actually need some repairs. There was a crack in the weld, the foot peg bracket that needed to get repaired. And then on each side of my subframe right here and here, there was a little split. Those had to get tacked up. But it turned out pretty good. We got some parts in, and I'm just gonna start assembling this frame. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take care of this linkage. I've already gotten the first 2 bearings out, so I'm gonna get the 3rd bearing out and show you guys. Clean this linkage up and polish it up. Here are the old linkage bearings. As the seals didn't look too horrible actually. So here's what I got. This is the Tusk linkage bearing kit for the Honda CR-85. Go ahead and rip these seals out of here. You don't need a seal puller for this, but it works so good. Definitely get one. I got this one for like $7 on Amazon. All right, so you can see that bearing in there, pretty rusted out. So I'm gonna show you guys how I get this out. All right guys, so we've got our linkage here, and I'm gonna be using the socket and vise method. So how you do this is you wanna find a socket that is the same size as the race of your bearing. And then you want to find a socket that's bigger than the bearing. And basically what you're going to do is with that socket, you're going to press that bearing into this other socket and you're going to get the bearing out. Get a torch. Some heat will help get that old bearing. So got the linkage cleaned up as best as I could, soap and water. So now we're gonna start polishing it on my PrimaMix cleaning wheel. I actually dropped my phone because this stand is so crappy that I cracked my back glass on my phone. So I'd really appreciate a sub or 2, but let's get this linkage polished up. So we got the linkage all polished up. Went ahead and polished out the bores a little bit with this 1-inch wheel. Cleaned out the bore so that it's smooth. I'm gonna go ahead and get that 2-inch rough wheel and clean up some of the sharp edges. Right there is sharp edge. And then the linkage will be all polished up. So now we're ready to install the new bearings and seals. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some grease, and we're going to put it in there. New bearing to sit in there on the grease. All right, so here's our new bearing. What we're going to do is we're going to use the socket and vise method again to drive these new bearings in there. While I have the bearing out, I'm going to go ahead and pack it full of grease. They do come lightly oiled, but it's always best to just pack it full of grease. All right, so I've got my linkage set up in the vise here. Just slowly drive the bearing into the linkage. Since this linkage doesn't have like an inner clip that the bearing seats against, we're gonna have to eyeball it. What we need to do is we just need to drive this bearing in until it's even on both sides. Should be right about there. And there you have it, guys. The new linkage bearing is installed. That the bearing was pressed in as center as I can get it. The process for the other 2 bearings is exactly the same. I'm gonna go get those bearings done. All the bearings in there, all nice and greased up. So let's go ahead and get the seals in there. All right, guys, so we've got all the seals put into the linkage. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get it onto the frame. Got the linkage mounted up onto the frame. It moves over nice and smoothly. Got that bolt torqued down to 43 foot-pounds. So next we are gonna get the shock. I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit. Up here on the shock, there's a little bearing in here, that needle bearing. I completely forgot about that and I did not order a new one. And this one definitely needs replaced because it is very seized up and rusted. So I'm gonna just pull the old seals and old bearing out of here. I'll just put the shock on the frame loosely with the bolt going through the hole. And once that comes in, we'll just put it in quickly. All right, guys, so we got the shock put back on, kind of polished it up a little bit. Now it's just gonna sit loosely on the frame like this, but it's starting to look like a bike. So next up, let's get the swing arm done, get that on the bike. Check that out. Nasty, man. Try to get these bearings out of here with the blind bearing puller.
Ten hours later.
This bearing really doesn't want to come out. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to use the socket and vice method. Alright guys, so after like 10 more minutes of fighting, finally got this one out. I just had to beat it out. We got all the bearings out of the swing arm, so now we can actually wash the swing arm and then get the new bearings installed. Alright guys, the swing arm has been washed. Got it as clean as I can. Let's go ahead and start polishing it. Finally got the swing arm polished up. One of these bearing bores had a really bad nick in it, so I had to grind it down the wheel. This clear coat's a little dirty, but I can't really clean that off. I don't want to shave the clear coat off. We are going to start installing these bearings. Alright guys, so I got this linkage bearing in here. It was a bit tough because it's hard to grab onto this part on the swing arm. I got that in there, so let's go ahead and get the seals in there. Alright, then we just get a little bit of grease, put it onto the whip. Just like that, we have our linkage bearing installed into the swing arm. Next, let's go ahead and get these swing arm bearings in. Alright guys, so we've got both those bearings in there. All the new seals. So next we're going to get the swing arm mounted up onto the bike. And then we'll clean up the linkage and get that back together. Guys, we got the swing arm loosely fitted and the shock loosely fitted. It's starting to look like a bike now. Looks really nice with that aluminum swing arm and the red frame. Shock loosely mounted up here until I get new bearings. Next up, the steer tube bearings. Race out of the freezer. You want to go ahead and just get your old bearing race, and you can use this to get your new one in there. There you have it. The new bearing races are in there, nice and seated all the way down. Guys, I finally got that bearing off of there. I had to use the Dremel and cut a slit in it, just enough to where some of the pressure was released, and then I was able to get it off because I was not going to get it off any other way. Alright guys, so we got both the triple clamps all nice and polished up. Let's get that lower steering stem bearing on there. Alright, the next up, you want to get a nice glob of grease. New bearing, you really want to grease this bearing up. You really want to pack this bearing with grease. Roll it around in there, packed into all the needles inside. There is no over greasing this bearing. Again, make sure that the seal is on there. Get your old bearing race, flip it upside down. And basically what you're trying to do with this is just press down on the inner race of that bearing to drive it down. The steering moves easily. Before you tighten it down, leave it loose, slide in the forks. That way it aligns it. Alright guys, so I've got the forks nice and cleaned up. Got them all nice and wiped down. Got some fresh hardware with some blue thread locker on there. This nut's supposed to get torqued down to 79 foot-pounds, what I've researched. Alright, 79 foot-pounds. I hope that's right. Alright guys, so got the forks in there. I'm trying to get equal amount of fork sticking out on each side. Alright, and then the torque spec for the triple clamps, upper and lower, is 16 foot-pounds. Forks are all nice and torqued down. Alright guys, so I just finished getting the handlebars cleaned up. Got those back on there. I put some fresh hardware here for this number plate, as well as down here for the fender. Guys, so I don't know if you can see that, but I got my coil mount points ground down to bare steel. Now we can go ahead and install the coil and CDI box. There we go, we got the coil and CDI mounted. Got the frame ground down right there for the coil. So we should have spark, fingers crossed. I also went ahead and kind of cleaned up my brake master cylinder and put that back on. I 3D printed a cable clip for it. I also got my clutch perk, put that back in there. Then I cleaned up the brake caliper a little bit for the front. We'll put that on later. Anyways, that's where I'm going to leave off for part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Comment down below what you thought about this video. Also, if you have anything to say about the build, go ahead and drop a comment down below. I appreciate you guys watching. Catch you in part 3.